King Arthur. I'm the King Arthur guy, and this is episode 10. Now, if you remember last episode, I said that I was starting to run out of things to say, so there's going to be this episode, and then there's going to be one more, and then that's it. Okay? So this particular episode is going to look at legends and the way that legends reflect values, and the way that these legends can also be reinterpreted by later generations. So I'm going to start with the story that I've already looked at in an earlier episode of Ambrosius Aurelianus and the Dragons. So quick recap. Vortigern was trying to build a castle. The castle kept falling down. He was advised to find a boy who had no earthly father, sacrifice the boy that he could build the castle. The boy, of course, was Ambrosius. His mother said that she was impregnated by a mystical being who visited her in a dream. Ambrosius made a deal with Vortigern that if he could explain the real reason why the castles kept falling down, then Vortigern would let him go. So they dig down on the spot, they find an underground lake, drain the lake, there's a chest, open the chest, there's two dragons, a red one and a white one. They fight each other. The red one eventually wins. Ambrosius interprets this as the red one representing the Britons, the white one representing the Saxons, being that this is a Welsh story. They use the term Saxon rather than Anglo-Saxon. But anyway, he said that there's going to be a great hero, by which he meant himself, who's going to bring final victory over the Saxons. Vortigern cannot build his castle there because that's where Ambrosius is going to build his castle. And he then just blurts out that his father was a Roman consul. Now, as I argued in the earlier episode, this originated as a piece of propaganda. But in the 12th century, in the 1130s, Geoffrey of Monmouth wrote the highly inaccurate History of the Kings of Britain. Geoffrey was a storyteller who passed himself off as an historian, and he had two heroes, Arthur and Merlin, and he wanted to put them together. But originally, Merlin was the hero of his own series of stories that were set in the late 6th century, a couple of generations after Arthur. So, in order to put Merlin into the Arthurian world, he rewrote this legend, swapping out the hero with Merlin. But he hedged his bets. The story must have been fairly well known among the educated Welsh of that time period, because he referred to the character as Merlin Ambrosius, and in one sentence as Merlin, who was also called Ambrosius. Anyway, he also had to cut out the bit about the father being a Roman consul, and the castle, or the location being the place where Merlin was going to build his castle, because of course Merlin didn't have a castle. And he also changed the great hero who's going to defeat the Saxons. It shifts from being Ambrosius to being Arthur. So he took a piece of propaganda written for political reasons and turned it into a piece of pure fantasy and the explanation for the origin of Merlin's and his magical powers. Now, in the 19th century, it was assumed that since the Welsh used the red dragon as a symbol, that the white dragon must have been a symbol for Anglo-Saxon England. And it is still sometimes said that that's true, but it's actually not true. Anglo-Saxon England had a gold dragon, but not a white one. What I find ironic is that English white supremacists will use the white dragon. And since bigots are completely out of touch with reality, they believe that although the Welsh are white, they're not white enough. They're still somehow inferior because they're not Aryan. Okay, now obviously because they're white supremacists, they're going to latch on to the white dragon. But the whole reason the dragon is white is because it's a Celtic story. In Celtic myth and legend, the colors of red and white were used to indicate supernatural beasts. So, for example, if the story included a herd of supernatural cattle, they could be described as red with white ears. So the red dragon represented the Britons, so the dragon representing the Anglo-Saxons was just going to be white because these are supernatural beasts. So it's ironic that that the symbol is now being used by that particular group who look down on the Celts, when the whole reason that it's a white dragon is because it's a Celtic story. Anyway, the gold dragon originated as a symbol for the Kingdom of Wessex. In the 9th century, the kings of Wessex became the kings of England, so the gold dragon continued to be used. It can be seen in the Bayeux Tapestry, which is a pictographic representation of the events leading up to the Battle of Hastings and the battle itself, which of course took place in 1066. And the last known use of the gold dragon is in a painting depicting the peasant revolts of 1381. The gold dragon just fell out of fashion and just stopped being used. Anyway, I now want to look at the Arthurian legend, the origin of the Arthurian legend, putting it back into the context of the time period of the 5th and 6th centuries. The 5th and first half of the 6th centuries was one of the most chaotic, perhaps the most chaotic time periods in all of Western European history. The Western Roman Empire was breaking down, being overrun by other peoples. So the Roman social, political, and economic systems were collapsing. But the systems of the people who had overrun it were also breaking down, because they were semi-nomadic tribal peoples who suddenly found themselves governing sedentary peoples who had large-scale agriculture and cities and towns. And their systems were not geared to handle that kind of thing. So, contrary to what many people will tell you, hatred does not cause violence. Hatred can be very destructive in many ways, but it does not actually cause violence. Violence comes from anger, and anger comes from either fear or frustration, or both. So in a situation where the structures of society are breaking down, there's an awful lot of fear, there's an awful lot of frustration. So we get into the situation of what Thomas Hobbes called all against all. Different groups battled each other for control of resources and the best real estate. Different factions or individuals within groups battled each other for dominance. And this made an indelible impression on the people who lived through this time period, so much so that no fewer than 3 great legendary epics are set during this period. They are the Nibelungenlied for the Germans, the Arthurian cycle for the Britons, and Beowulf for the Anglo-Saxons. Now, each has its own unique features, but all have one theme in common: chaos. So the Nibelungenlied is set among the Burgundians, who were ruled by the 3 Nibelungen brothers. All 3 were kings, but the eldest brother was the senior king. And the story actually begins with the hero Siegfried, who has several adventures, including slaying a dragon and taking the dragon's treasure. He then marries Kriemhild, the sister to the Nibelungen brothers. Now, they are jealous of Siegfried. He's popular, they are not. He is wealthy, they are not. So they conspire with their vassal Hagen to murder Siegfried and steal the treasure. So this is the breakdown of the social order. You have kings who are supposed to be the upholders of justice in society, who are conspiring to commit murder. On top of that, to steal a treasure and even cheat their own sister, because by rights, even if they do kill Siegfried, as his widow, she should be his heir and should inherit the treasure. So it's a breakdown of legal norms, it's a breakdown of family connections, and it cannot go unpunished. Anyway, Kriemhild demands justice. She knows Hagen is the one who actually committed the murder, but her brothers refuse to punish Hagen. She also demands the treasure, and since she has popular support on her side, Hagen dumps the treasure into the Rhine River, making sure that nobody gets it. Now, time passes, and she's contacted by a foreign ruler who wants to marry her. She agrees. Her brothers think this is great, that she's accepted the situation and is moving on. In reality, this is the first step to her getting revenge. And she has a good chance of getting this revenge, given that this foreign ruler is Attila the Hun. This is how we know the time period that the story is set. Attila died in 453. Anyway, so several years pass. She and Attila have a child, about 5 years old, and the Nibelungen brothers and Hagen are invited to visit their sister, and she tries to spring her trap and kill them, but they take shelter in a feasting hall, and Hagen has managed to kidnap the young child. Now, Attila is staying out of this fight. This is his wife, although any of his warriors who want to support her can do so, but it's not actually his fight, at least not yet. But Hagen holds the child to ransom, saying that he will kill the child unless the Burgundians are given safe passage. Kriemhild calls his bluff, but it turns out not to be a bluff. He actually does kill the child. This enrages Attila. It's a break with social norm. Not only is it another murder, but it's infanticide. So this just seals the fate of the Burgundians, and they die with the feasting hall burning down around them. So it all ends in chaos. And we have the Arthurian legend. There are several different versions of the legend, as it was changed as time went on. I'm going to go with the most common version of the legend, that of La Morte d'Arthur, written in 1485. So you will remember that after Arthur's birth, he was taken by Merlin and given to Sir Hector to be raised, but Merlin did not tell Hector where the child came from. When he grew up, Arthur found this attractive woman. They had an affair, but it turns out this was his sister Morgause, and they had an illegitimate son, Mordred. To compound all of this, she was married to Urien. So this sin, this double sin of committing adultery and incest, is one of the most important factors dooming the Round Table. Another factor is that Arthur favors the foreigner Lancelot over his own flesh and blood. Now, since Mordred was born out of wedlock, he does not have a legitimate claim on the throne, but he wants the throne anyway. Now, the rightful heir is Sir Gawain, Arthur's eldest nephew, and Mordred's stepbrother. But Mordred is the one who desires the throne. So we have not only Arthur's crimes, but also Mordred's ambition and break with the legalities, insisting on seizing a throne that he has no legal right to, not only because he was born out of wedlock, but also because Gawain is his elder brother. Anyway, it all leads to this showdown between Arthur and Mordred, and they kill each other, and Britain slides back into chaos again. Beowulf is the odd one out, in that the forces of chaos are not represented by people and their flaws and evil traits, but by monsters. Grendel, who is described variously as either a troll or an ogre, because those two terms were used interchangeably back in those days, attacks Heriot, which is the feasting hall of Hrothgar. This is how we know the time period when Beowulf is set. Hrothgar was real. He was a king of the Danes. Unfortunately, we can't pinpoint exactly when he reigned, except it was sometime in the first half of the 6th century. Anyway, Beowulf must kill Grendel. Then Grendel's mother seeks revenge, so he has to kill her as well. Then the story time jumps, and Beowulf returns to his own people, the Yeats, where he becomes their king, but then he has to protect them from a dragon. And just as Arthur and Mordred slay each other, Beowulf and the dragon kill each other. And then the Yeats have been bereft of their great hero king. They are now vulnerable. So the story ends on the depressing note that they're probably going to be attacked and overrun by their enemies. It is not a coincidence that both the Nibelungenlied and Beowulf contain attacks on feasting halls. Feasting halls were viewed as sanctuaries where men could feel safe and relax and have a good meal and a few drinks and laughs with their friends and get some entertainment. So the attack on the feasting hall is the forces of chaos attacking the forces of order and justice. We don't actually get this in the Arthurian legends, because by the time they started to be written down in the 12th and 13th centuries, the authors of that time period put the Arthurian stories into the medieval world that they were familiar with. But I want to look at Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, which begins with the Green Knight bursting into the court at Camelot. Well, if we view Camelot not as a medieval castle, but as a 6th century feasting hall, then we do get the same kind of thing, this force of chaos invading the sanctuary. Now, the Green Knight is a supernatural being. He's taller and stronger than most men, and he's got green skin. Now, he bursts into Camelot around Christmas time, which is a time for games, so he challenges the Knights of the Round Table to play the beheading game. One of them will have the opportunity to try and cut off his head. Then a year from then, the knight will travel to the Green Chapel, and the Green Knight will get the opportunity to try and cut off the Round Table Knight's head. Gawain is the only knight brave enough to accept this challenge, this game. So he cuts off the Green Knight's head, but the Green Knight, being a figure of such great supernatural powers, he picks up his head, he doesn't even put it back on, and says, right, I'll see you a year from now, and then leaves. So Gawain has to find the Green Chapel. No one knows where it is. So he spends the better part of 12 months looking for it until he finally comes upon the castle of Sir Berkelac. And Berkelac tells him, oh, don't worry, I know where the Green Chapel is, it's not far away. You still have a few days yet. So Berkelac challenges him to a game. Berkelac will go hunting every day, and Gawain will stay in the castle. And then each will give the other what they are able to get. So on the first day, Berkelac kills a deer. Gawain is known for being very attractive to women, and he discovers, much to his dismay, that Lady Berkelac tries to seduce him. He manages to resist her charms, but she does kiss him. So Gawain gets the deer, and then they make the exchange. Berkelac gives Gawain the deer, Gawain gives Berkelac a kiss. The second day, it's Berkelac kills a boar, which was considered an act of great bravery, given how fierce boars were. And Gawain gets 2 kisses. Okay? So the exchange is made. But on the third day, Lady Berkelac admits that she's given up on trying to seduce him, and instead gives him a magical girdle which will protect him from harm, but only if he keeps it a secret and doesn't tell anyone about it. So Sir Berkelac kills a fox. Foxes in those days were considered vermin and couldn't eat a fox. So the exchange then is made that Berkelac gives Gawain the fox, but instead of Gawain giving Berkelac the girdle, he keeps it a secret and gives Berkelac 3 kisses. So it's the symbolism, of course, is the vermin, because Gawain has broken his vows. He's, he is not going along with what he agreed to do. And anyway, he then goes out, travels to the Green Chapel, and discovers, much to his amazement, that it's actually an oddly shaped hill. The Green Knight appears, and Gawain has to steel himself to sit down or kneel down and submit to the beheading game, but he gets frightened. So it takes him 3 attempts before he can finally do it. Of course, the number 3 has mystical associations for many cultures and many religions. We've already seen it with the 3 animals that Berkelak killed, and the 3 kisses. Well, anyway, on this 3rd attempt, Berkelak just nicks the side of Gawain's neck. Gawain is overjoyed. He thinks he's won, but the Green Knight, oh, I've given it away. The Green Knight is actually Berkelak. And Gawain has failed the test. He was never really in danger. This was all just to test his knightly virtues, and he failed. He did keep his virtue of chastity, but by not sleeping with Berkelak's wife, he resisted this seduction. But he broke his word, and he wasn't as courageous as he was supposed to be. But so he keeps the sash, or rather girdle, as a reminder that he failed to live up to these ideals, and that he will try harder. Now, this one, there's no significant punishment, because Gawain, unlike the other examples, Gawain was not actually evil. He was just flawed, and he promises to do better, so he redeems himself. But the others are much more serious and cause the breakdown of society, because the other examples, because we're looking at much more serious crimes, and often done for selfish reasons. And the peoples of this time period took these kinds of things very seriously, and a major breach would result in serious consequences, no matter who the person was. Let's not forget that Ambrosius Aurelianus did not have to kill Vortigern when he seized power in the coup. He could have sent Vortigern into exile. So he was assassinated in a blood feud that he started. See, they were in this period of chaos, but they were trying to rebuild it. They didn't like the chaos. So these attacks on the social norms, these attacks on sanctuaries, these were bad things. And anyway, they were trying to rebuild society, so they couldn't tolerate these breaches. This is the point that I'm trying to make. But by the time you get to Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, society was more stable. So the problems were not as significant. Anyway, that's all I have to say for this episode. If you've gotten this far, I hope you've enjoyed what I've had to say and found it interesting. I hope you'll subscribe and maybe comment and leave a thumbs up. And hope you'll come back for the next episode, which, as I said, is going to be the last one. So until then, be seeing you.